Well, maybe you could just start by just, introducing yourself. Tell us a bit about what you do.
Hello, I'm Terri Shield. I'm actually a designer, host, and mentor. So my background is that I kind of come from a creative art and design background and have a kind of a design mind, and also have had to embark on a healing recovery journey just due to past trauma and different events in my life that kind of got me to a point where things weren't going very well. We'll put it that way. So actually what I did is had to kind of divert my lifestyle, really look at how I was living my life. And what I figured out on the journey is that I can use my design mind and my creativity to adapt to a healing and wellness recovery journey. So for the past few years, I have been either supporting people one-to-one or I have been developing courses that explain some of the ways of thinking and some of the things that I've discovered that need to be considered on a healing wellness journey for me anyway, what works for me, how I've been able to kind of maybe see things in a slightly different way to what's in the kind of mainstream narrative. And I share that now. I share that in an online space called Love School, and try and get the message out to people about holistic health and well-being for healing. That's a bit about me.
Hey, that's lovely. So you talk about sort of holistic well-being. That's your thing. So could you maybe, tell us a bit more about, what that really means for people?
Yeah, for sure. So I think when I start to talk about this, I kind of have to go back to the beginning. I used to maybe just live my life based on ideas that were quite limited of what I thought I should do or what I had learned previously, just in my lifestyle, which turned out not to suit me. And like I say, once I kind of got to a point where I had to really address some of the problems I was having. I was having mental health problems. I kept getting into lots of traumatic experiences. Things just kept happening that weren't aligned with my well-being. And there was kind of a pivotal moment actually where I was like, I was staying with some friends, and we were sitting on a fire. It was really nice. And then we'd kind of chat about things that are going on. And one of the ladies said, you don't have to unpack your entire life. You just have like someone says something quite, and it was just like this light bulb moment. I was like, oh my God, I do. Like she had no idea like how far off track I had gone. I was like, that's what I need to do. I said, I need to track back through my life and start to pay more attention to what's actually happened. And that just kind of completely changed how I was looking at my circumstances. So I was looking at my circumstances as if there was something that was just happening that I had no control over. And because at the time, like I say, I had been doing design, and at that point I was looking into permaculture design, which was very much about living off the land and ecosystem designs, how ecosystems are created. And I was using some of the tools at the time to design spaces. And there's this really great book called People in Permaculture by Luby McNamara. And I started using that as like a tool. I thought, well, actually, what if I start to look at my life as an ecosystem, as if there's like all these contributing factors that have gotten me to where I am now. And if I then want to change where I'm going or how my life is, just like when you're changing like anything in nature, like a land project or anything, I need to consider all of these different factors. So that's what I did. So I started to get really strategic then, and just started looking at the different areas of my life. Sometimes it can get a little bit complex, I think, or can seem a bit intimidating, is more what I'll say, right? Because the way when you talk about ecosystem, that sounds big, right? But actually, I think there's these two contradictions that we are complex beings. We have lived complex lives. Lots of things have happened to us, for us, around us. And there's a lot of things that can contribute to our health and well-being or our struggle and our suffering. But I kind of think that there's probably 6 key areas of our being, and they might have other smaller systems in, that we need to kind of get the basics or the fundamentals operating well to start to holistically kind of heal. So that's like our body, our physical body. What does our body need? And that's like the, you know, basic stuff like, are you eating well? Are you moving? Are you getting your rest? Are you getting your fluids? And it's amazing. Like when I look back, I wasn't. Like I wasn't even doing these like basic things that you're like, oh, well, no wonder I'm a bit stressed. I'm not even like, you know, eating properly or making sure I'm getting enough sleep or whatever. So you look at your body, and then there's the mind. There might be lots of reasons why we're not taking care of our body. And the mind is obviously maybe to be a bit more complex, but our mind is like, in some ways, very simple. What are we believing? What are we thinking about ourselves? What's motivating us and what's limiting us? So whatever we are kind of allowing to motivate us towards either health and well-being, what's blocking us, what's stopping us from trying to get better or improve our lives or look after ourselves. And then deeper than that, like what are we believing that's creating those conditions? Because if we don't actually think it's possible to get better, we don't want to improve, like, you know, if we don't want to care for ourselves, there's maybe something going on there we need to look at. Then there's like our emotional life, which I think is like kind of links with spirit. I'll talk a bit. That's like our energy. So for me, our emotions are like, call them energy emotions. They're like, how are our energy levels? How are we feeling about what we're doing? How are we feeling about what we're thinking? And they're like messengers. So if we start to look at our energy and how we're responding to things, it can give us signposts as to where we need to look for our body, for our well-being, for our mind, our thinking. They're all kind of linked together. And then ultimately, we've got, what are we doing with this energy? Our spirit, what are we creating? What are we giving out in the world? What are we taking from the world? What meaning are we giving to life? All of that deeper stuff, which personally I found really important for my recovery. So I talk about it. We all have our own ideas about what that is for us. But if you don't know what it is, if you don't know what your core values are, what life is for you, it can cause a lot of confusion, or it did for me anyway. And then we've got the external stuff. So we've got our environments, often like our environments, where are we putting ourselves? What are we exposing ourselves to that's contributing towards how we're currently feeling, thinking, how we're taking care of ourselves. And then our relationships, which is another really important external factor. And when we want to get well and things, and when we're looking at wellness and how we're responding to ourselves, it can change a lot of things about us potentially, or our actions, our behaviors, and then that can impact our relationships, and our relationships in turn have kind of molded us often into the environments and the situations that we're in. So sorry, that was maybe a big response to that. But that's kind of the ecosystem thinking that I've kind of come to look at. You can't really do one thing without it affecting another, is what I've discovered. If you really get into the nitty gritty of taking care of your health and well-being, it affects all of this other stuff. So when you become conscious of it and you're just like, well, if I start to do something differently, if I start to want to work out, even want to eat a healthy diet, that might affect the other people I'm sharing a house with. That might affect my other relationships. That might affect what I do at work. Do you know what I mean? It starts to have a ripple effect in our lives that can actually sometimes stop us from even trying to change or get well or take care of ourselves, whatever it might be. So that's kind of the idea of the ecosystem holistic view that I've kind of adopted now for health and well-being.
That's really interesting. It's very interesting because I'm really into permaculture as well, and I mean I've read even at my book as well, and I never really thought about applying it quite that way to sort of the health. But when you say that, it's
Yeah, sorry, this might go off on a bit of a tangent, but this, when I was well into the permaculture stuff, and it might come back around again. I don't know what direction my life will take, but that was my thing. I was like really into, like, I wanted to do a lot of, so what I'll talk about potentially if we get there, life design, was my own kind of spin on permaculture. So that type of design thinking is kind of what has fed all of the life design stuff. So once I kind of made this realization and brought these things together, I thought, actually, no one in the permaculture community seems to be talking about the way I see it, which is how we can use permaculture thinking for all different kinds of systems, natural systems, because essentially we are just another natural system. So if we can adapt the same principles, the same thinking to all them other areas, like I said, that's kind of how we make a more holistic ecosystem. It all kind of fits together, but I can go off on one. So
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, feel free. So wherever you want to talk about. Yeah, you've talked about how people need to kind of integrate all these different areas of their life. So how then do people find out, what works for them?
okay, we'll go into life design. Become your own researcher, scientist, get curious. That is number one, right? And it kind of links to the other stuff we'll talk about, but there's no point there's not no point. We are often told what works or what doesn't work. And there's so much information now, right? We are like swimming in information, data, science, all this stuff, right? This works, you need to do this, you need to do that. Da, da, da. There's so much stuff, right? So you could literally pick and choose, like a pick and mix, what you want to believe. And sometimes it's like so overwhelming. You're just like, I can't do all these things. So this is where I kind of start to be a bit more conscious and choose, because you can't do all the things. We can't do all the things all the time. So start somewhere. So once you're kind of considering, this is the two aspects of life design, is exploring and understanding, figuring out what works. So getting curious and actually gather your own data. Because when you know what works for you, it doesn't matter what all of this other information is. If it's not relevant to you, it's not relevant to you. Okay. Doesn't matter how much science, data, opinions. If it doesn't work for you, it doesn't work for you. If it does work for you, it does work for you. And the only way you're going to find out is to try. Okay. And then the other part of it, and that's like that is a designer's journey, right? That's what designers do. They try stuff. They try stuff. They figure out if it works, and if one bit works, you go, oh, right, yes, I'll keep that. That doesn't work. No, I'll get rid of that. I'll get rid of that. And then the other side of it is becoming like a bit strategic and structured about that, because so it doesn't get so overwhelming. And once you figure out what works, you keep what works and you let go of the stuff that doesn't, and you use the things that work to create something new. And that's what like life design is. So I personally am naturally quite intuitive, and I found once I kind of, like I say, had that light bulb moment, and I started committing to the process, and I was like, like I say, the Luby's web is very good. It gives you at least a structure of where to start and things. And I started initially with like brainstorming and different things like that, doing a bit of research online. But what was I drawn to? Because I think naturally we've got an intuition that's going to guide us towards things we're either that, what are we attracted to? What are we drawn to? Oh, that looks interesting. Something looks interesting, try it. And figure out if it works. Does it work? And it's not like some things we'll instantly find out if it works or not, right? I generally think, we might try something and be like, oh, no, actually, that's really not for me. Sometimes we have to go back. We have to do it a few times. We've got to give it a chance to work. Like something, for example, like meditation is not going to happen overnight. You're not going to be like, well, I tried meditation once and it doesn't work, or I tried meditation once and it does work. You know what I mean? Sometimes it's a practice, and you've got to, and this is why you've got to be a bit strategic with it. You've got to give it a chance, collect your data. Right, I'll try it for X amount of time and see if this helps, and try and figure out how it helps and why it helps. And then, either way, you've got an answer. If something hasn't worked, like you say, you might then have to try something else. And life design for me, it's like an unfolding. That's why I kind of talk about like a recovery journey. We're recovering ourselves. I've never found an instant solution pretty much for anything. Sometimes things happen, like I say, we get these moments and we're like, oh yes, we really resonate with something, or things can have ebbs and flows, and suddenly we can heal or move forward quite quickly. But generally, my journey has been quite a long one. I'm talking like my light bulb moment was like several years ago. So it's just been like an unfolding and just a commitment to that process. And if it helps, I keep doing it. If something doesn't help, I do less of it. And I know now, so I'm not even going to say at the end of this life design process, because my life design is constantly evolving, but I generally have a tool belt and I know what works and what doesn't in different scenarios. So I can sometimes like let things go or not focus so much on that, but it might come back around again. So I might not use tools that help me in stress for coping with stress if I'm not in a stressful situation. My life's quite calm. I don't really need them as often. So I can focus on other things that maybe need a different kind of energy. If I then start to get more stressed and I'm like, I know I'm getting stressed now, I can start using my stress tools and bring myself back down to a calm. I can then, you know what I mean? It's kind of like knowing yourself well enough and knowing what works for you well enough that you can literally start to pull on that and consciously choose what's going to help you day by day, moment by moment, situation by situation. And that's kind of like what happens in an ecosystem. So that's what happens in nature. We don't have, we don't always have the same weather. You don't always wear like a jumper and a rain mac, but when it rains, you do. And like that is like the simplest way I can try and describe it. It's like being able to know what tools, what things you use that are going to respond to life as it happens, so that as it's happening and moving in, you're prepared. It's never perfect, right? We can't, it could be a lovely sunny day if you live in England. It could be a lovely sunny day and you go out and it rains and you haven't brought your rain mac and you're like, oh, well, I did have a rain mac and I left it at home. But you know what I mean? It's not trying to be perfect or anything. It's just understanding that we can develop tools and skills and be more conscious of them so that we can use them when we need them. And then when we don't need them as much, we can leave them at home, put them down, focus on other things. And that's the kind of life design that I talk about a lot.
Okay, yeah, that's great. Because yeah, I think that's something a lot of people do sort of struggle with, don't they? When they sort of, they're aware that things in their life are maybe not as they should be, but they struggle to sort of know how to do anything about it, and to maybe
We've
make
never
that
been
shift.
taught, honestly. Like, and I even did, because I was a designer, all the stuff that I did at my school, especially like, as I was going through education, was focused on design. But we were never taught, or I wasn't, certainly at my generation, and it doesn't seem to be getting any better. We're never taught how to like design for ourselves, to think for ourselves. Like, I don't want to go off on one about the school system, but we're taught what we should think or what is the right answer, not how to find the right answer. And I think that has had it's got a massive ripple effect impact, and we can see it because people are, like I say, so overwhelmed with all of the information now that we almost shut down, because it's like there's so many people saying this is the right answer, this is the right answer, this is the right answer, and you're just like, well, I can't do all that. Like, I can't do that. You know what I mean? If you listen to all the experts, well, you just can't. Because like so contradictory. Do you know what I mean? You can find a contradiction for anything. You can find science to back up 8 hours sleep a night, and you can find science to back up 4 hours sleep a night. You can find science that says eat all meat. You can find science that says be vegan. You know what I mean? Like, there's so much out there now. I think that's kind of where we've just got to. And a lot of people, like you said, just struggle with just swimming in all of that. And so they're kind of reaching out for some sort of answer, but not reaching in. And I think that's like it was a massive thing for me once, like I say, I realized that I can find out for myself. Might make some mistakes along the way. I can question, is this diet better for me, or is that diet better than me? Is this amount of sleep what I need? Is that amount of sleep? Like, I don't follow like routines and stuff. And for years, excuse me, for years I used to think I have to have a routine, right? If I don't have a routine, I'm going to be so like, chaotic. Turns out it's the opposite. Me trying to follow a routine is utter chaos. It just didn't work because it's just not how I am. So now I've just accepted that. my life is much calmer because there's no real routine. Like I have certain structures in there. So, if I have an appointment, I show up. But otherwise, like my life is not fixed like that. And the stress that used to cause trying to live in like I say, what's the right way just caused so much stress and anxiety and all of that, those types of things for me. It wasn't worth it. And then once I realized it's not worth it, I figure out what works for me. And like I say, for me, it's a bit of a balance. Now it works. So that's kind of what's really important, I think, that for me, just to reassure people that they can self-validate, self-regulate, get feedback. And the feedback is as simple as, if you feel crap doing it, it's probably not good for you. And that doesn't mean like, sometimes we have to do things that are hard, that take commitment or dedication or effort for our well-being, especially. And so sometimes that means, we might, especially if you're trying to like change your diet or work out or meditate and these things, sometimes, we can hit a wall and we can struggle sometimes. But what we'll find is it's like on an incline, you're generally feeling better. Even though you might struggle for a little bit, it's generally helping, it's generally helping, it's generally helping. But if you get to a point where it's really not helping and it's making you feel really crap, really crap, really crap, just stop doing it. It's probably not helpful. And for me, that it was as simple as that. Does this help? Do I generally feel better for doing it on a fluctuation chart? Because like it might go up and down, but if it's generally going up and down and I'm getting better, then it's probably helpful. And we kind of, for some reason, like I say, there's a lot of confusion and fear perhaps about that being wrong, or especially if you're in real pain. The idea when we do something that it might cause us more pain, it can be, really fearful. You're like, I don't want to do this and be in more pain. I get that. That's really challenging part of a healing journey. But just try it a little bit, because you might just do a little bit and it might ease the pain a bit. So then you can do a little bit more and it eases the pain a bit, and you think, there is an ease afterwards. So it's complex, hence the holistic idea.
Yeah. So it's really a lot of, getting people to trust their sort of, their intuition, and sort of trust that they do know what's sort of, your body does know what's best for you, really. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I genuinely now, like, I suppose it's just a core belief of mine. I have evidence for myself. So I like know almost, but I genuinely think a system, and even if you go back to systems thinking, a system generally wants to function well, right? An ecosystem generally wants to function well and find some sort of balance. And it's the same for like our bodies and if we're distressed, it's probably because something isn't quite right. And we get that sensation and we ignore it. Like, so this is part of the problem why we end up in really complex situations, is because we get this instinct, whatever you want to call it, we get a signal that goes, this is not quite right. And we ignore it and we suppress it and we reject it and we carry on doing the same thing or doing what someone else says we should do. And then it ends up getting more and more complex. And then it seems like such a huge diversion to get back to where we were. That's where the fear and stuff like that comes in. But I just genuinely think if you trust that, if it feels good, it's probably, good. It's not like necessarily a hedonistic thing. But this is the other thing with the shadow work. So the other side that I think is very important. So we do the life design, which is kind of consciously creating, being present, gathering this data, looking ahead, look at what we would like. And then there's the other side of it. Why are we not doing that? So we have this intuition that's telling us this is a good idea, or this feels good, do more of it, or, oh, don't do that, or, oh, don't go there, right? But we've learned somehow, somewhere along the line, we've learned to ignore it, or we're not paying attention to ourselves, we're not trusting ourselves. Something is going on, right? And we're ignoring it. And that's what the shadow work is. That's like the deeper stuff. And that's where we start to kind of get to the nitty gritty, actually, where the healing comes in. Because there's going to be a whole heap. It's like the iceberg, them iceberg visuals that you see. There's like, this is on the surface. I'm feeling stressed, anxious. I'm gaining weight, or I'm feeling fatigued. Top of the iceberg. That's a warning, right? Something's not right. Underneath all of that is going to be all this stuff that we've been shoving down, ignoring, repressing, not paying attention to. And that's the why. Why am I feeling anxious? Why am I feeling fatigued? All this. And just being, and it does take a bit of bravery. It's not the easy stuff, but just to start looking at it and going, oh, well, why actually? Why is, and we, again, we often find when we start to ask, the answers come up, but there might not be answers that we want. Because like I say, there's a reason we repress them. There's a reason we carried on doing all this other stuff. And that's where the healing comes in. It's like, well, I stopped doing this behavior because my friends didn't approve of it at school. Right. That's a good one. That inner child work is like a massive thing, right? There's so many things we stopped doing as teenagers that were good for us, or we liked because our friends at school said whatever, or the teachers at school said whatever, or our parents, or whoever it might be. And then it's like, well, I'm not doing this thing that's really good for me because I was told it was uncool and I wanted to look a certain way amongst my friends, or whatever it might be. Then we've just got to heal that. So do I still believe that? Is that sensible? As a grown adult now with all this experience that I know the consequences of not doing this thing, do I still want to listen to that school friend from like 10 years ago? Maybe not. So then we go back to the life design. We go, right, I'm not going to listen. Like, I'm not going to believe that anymore. I'm not going to think that about myself anymore. I don't care if this thing looks uncool. I want to feel well. So now I'm going to try it. So I'm going to try the thing that I was told, was uncool. And then it turns out, oh, it's helpful. Yay. I'm going to keep doing it. And there might be all sorts of gremlins come up as we do that. And you just kind of deal with them as they come up then. I find that's like the shadow work. Just keep questioning yourself. Like if something comes up, if there's a fear or an anxiety or a critical voice in our head, whatever it is, so like you shouldn't do that, or you're doing this wrong, whatever, just get curious about it. And for me, that's like the deeper stuff of the healing. And what that does is that frees you up. It allows you to just then live the life that you know works for you, regardless of all this other stuff, regardless of all the information on the internet, all the criticism, all that. And you're like, well, maybe that says that, but I know because I've gathered all this evidence. You know what I mean? You've self-validated. I know that this works for me. So it doesn't really matter if you approve or whatever. I know, as long as you're not hurting people, I know that that's helpful and helps me stay well. And ultimately, that's like the combination that I've just found. And it kind of comes up in different ways. It can change and evolve as we do. And like I say, that these things, the shadow work stuff can come up in different ways, in different circumstances. And we have to adjust our life depending on what happens. There's ebbs and flows. And when we're going through a particularly stressful time, we might have to adjust our life accordingly. And then as we work through that, as the circumstances change, we can adopt and change our lifestyle again. But I think just having that flexibility and knowing that we're an ecosystem, like an alive ecosystem, like outside, that changes, throughout the year, and then every year is slightly different. I think if we give ourselves that freedom, that's where we get this idea of like holistic healing and well-being from.
Is there anything else you want to sort of, particularly talk about? I know there's lots of things you can talk about,
Yeah, I was
but
gonna say, there's so many tangents, isn't there? That was the crux of what I was wanting to talk about today. I think I've maybe mentioned a little bit about the details, but I suppose I've got a feeling there's going to be a lot of people on your summit that's going to talk about the details, is what I'm going to guess. That there's maybe a lot of people that are talking about how to take care of your body, or how to take care of your mental health, or how to take care of your spirit. So the key for me, again, is just to reiterate, it's what works for you. It's finding out, getting really clear what works for you, and then kind of solidifying that sense of self in that, like I say, and the life design process can be something tangible. So some of the things that I share are like literal tools. So a bit like the permaculture design process, they're actual tools that I've developed that are ways to plan, ways to structure, questions to ask yourself, different things like that, that are actual tools that you can write out and create a strategy for your life. There was at one, now I generally don't have that. I do, because I've developed that a lot in the past. I do often do a refresh in January actually for like setting intentions and stuff for the year, but I don't need that again. I don't need that tool so much at the moment because it's developed and I'm not going through that confusing phase of seeking. And when we're first starting out, being structured about that, like actually writing out a plan, having charts and data, all of that might seem really odd because we're not taught it. But it's, I don't know, for me, it's a weird thing. It's like, because it's tangible, because it's written there and you can see it and you can gather data and stuff, and you've got something to reference back in their moments of confusion. It's just really helpful. I had one friend when I was like working through this, and she was like, oh, I'm going to start charting. So this is a great one for women, right? I'm going to start charting my cycle. And what she did was like started off very strategically, like charting her menstrual cycle, which we're told a lot to do, and maybe don't. But that's like a huge thing, as a woman. If you don't even know on your menstrual cycle, right, what your fluctuations are each month, when something comes up and you're like, oh, I'm having a really crap day, it's like, oh, hang on. Do I normally have a really crap day around this time of the month? And if the answer is yes, because you can check on a chart, like, do you know what? It's not a crap day. I'm just a bit hormonal today. I'm going to do what I need to rest. And then you kind of know. So you're like constantly always, validating your experience, if you like. But another thing, like when we do this on a longer term, if you get really curious, you can actually start to track things like, for example, I've learned like trauma symptoms can come up at a certain kind of year. If you've had a significant event, like as a healing journey, it's like an unfolding, isn't it? It's like goes on, it's not start, heal, end. It's like an unfolding of us and our experience. If something significant happens at a certain time of year, our body's like constantly picking up on these things. So if something happened, for example, in the depths of winter around Christmas, right? Which a lot of things actually happen around Christmas, I think, for people. Probably because we're around so many people and it's such a crazy time sometimes. Your body, because we're always like seeking clues anyway, naturally, I think what's going on. And our intuition might be like, you know what, this is a dangerous time of year. So we can have an old thing coming up, causing us stress that's actually not relevant to our current circumstances. And it doesn't have to be like totally deal, but if you, for example, been keeping a journal or something like that, and you're like, I'm kind of feeling a bit stressed and anxious and I don't know why, but you can flick back to last year's journal and go, you know what, I did last year at this time. I was also feeling a bit stressed and anxious. And you're like, maybe this is like a pattern. Again, just like getting curious when you've got that process, that design, those tools and things there, you just help to relieve some of the uncertainty and the confusion. And that all links with, like I say, the shadow work stuff where we might be having to look at a deeper wound or something. Maybe something hasn't healed from the past. And then I know then if it's like repeating every year, I know then to look at it. I don't want to keep feeling this stress every year for the rest of my life. So you know what, maybe this year I'm going to look at what's underneath the iceberg. I'm going to look at what's causing this stress and give it some attention, help to soothe that. And then maybe next year I won't be as stressed. We don't know. You don't know until you find out. But I think when we have that kind of longer term mindset, when we can start to just prioritize ourselves in quite a strategic way like that, you know, I found that really helpful. And it doesn't have to be forever as well. Like it's not something we have to, we're always evolving. And like I say, things can come up, life happens. So we might always have to look at our wellness but we're not always going to have to be fixated on, like I say, shadow work or life design. It doesn't have to control and take over our lives forever, but the more attention we can give it when it's relevant, I found the more impact that we have down the line. So if something's really relevant and you look at it now and give it the attention now, you're not having to then struggle with the consequences for years down the line and then look at it, if that makes sense. But yeah, I think that's probably everything that I wanted, that I felt like it would be good to share on your summit.
That's lovely. Thank you. So if people want to, find out more about what you do and get in touch with you, how can they find you?
Like I say, I have been developed some courses. I share some of the tools and things that I've developed in an online space called Love School. So that catchy title, Love School. But it's basically about how do you love yourself? How do we love others? So it's looking at like self-care. It's looking at others, our relationships, our environments, and it's looking at love and life. So it's like looking at how we can work towards creating a life that we prefer. And then within that, there's a few different courses. I have, if you're interested in the life design, there's a life design course that's got all the tools in. There's a natural holistic healing course, which is kind of more of a masterclass that breaks down how you might use the life design tools for the purposes of planning and strategizing a recovery journey. And I'm very happy to like offer people, I've got a free, so they can access it for free, affirmations for healing course. And affirmations are just like one part of a healing journey that I've found that's really beneficial. If we don't think we can heal, if we don't believe things can get better, if we're not, especially if our mind's constantly telling us to focus on the problems or not, oh, don't try that, there's no point trying that, it's never going to work, all that. Affirmations is just one thing that we can do that I always come back around to if I'm feeling a bit stuck, if I feel like I would like to explore something new, but I'm feeling that tension around it. I always kind of start with affirmations because it just starts to open your mind up to possibilities. And I think if we can start believing that things can get better, if we can actually start to trust that we can heal, trust ourselves, all of that stuff, it at least gives us an opportunity to try. That's what I think. So there's an affirmations for healing course that anybody on the summit is very welcome to access. I think he'll be given the link out for that, you said, isn't it? But it's loveschool.uk/affirm. And over at Love School, there's loads of free content. There's blogs, if you like to kind of read. There's blogs. I do videos as well when I'm inspired to on different topics. They're either on the Love School or on YouTube. So if anyone's interested in any of that, they can find, it's generally somewhere at Love School UK. That's me.
Okay.
And I'm Terri Lee Shield. I'm great at promotion. Learning all that now. Oh yes, I'm Terri.
Yes, I know.